Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.
Well, hi everybody, and welcome back to Doctor Who Literature, the podcast taking you through the world of the Doctor Who novelizations put out by Target Books from 1973 onward in publication order. We're a member of the Direction Point Doctor Who podcast network. My name is Jason, and I'm your host on this journey, this very long journey, which is currently in mid-1979. This episode is being released the day before Halloween, and we have a very appropriate, one of the rare Halloween-themed Doctor Who stories being adapted in book form. It is The Image of the Fendahl from Season 15 of the classic series, and a 1979 book adaptation that came out about 2 years after the TV serial. It is a ghost story. Now, we will be talking at length later on in the recording about both the TV episode and the book. My guest is U.S. TV producer David Barsky, who is back from a field shoot. He will be talking about his new series that is going to be dropping in January. And, of course, we will have plenty of Doctor Who chat as well as a labored series of double entendres that David and I very, very carefully cultivated over the course of our recording. There's been a lot of Doctor Who news over the last week. As you all know, this episode is being released on Sunday, 1 week after the Sunday release of the final episode of new series, Season 13. The last episode on which Chris Chibnall is showrunner, and the last episode in which Jodie Whittaker is the Doctor, the 13th Doctor. She regenerates at the end of the episode into, spoiler alert, in the unlikely event that you have not seen the episode yet, David Tennant, who already played the Doctor between 2006 and New Year's Day 2010. He is coming back to the role. A brief trailer was released for 3 episodes that will air in 2024, all 3 starring David Tennant. Ncuti Gatwa, who is going to be playing the new Doctor, is being described as incoming and returning showrunner. Russell T Davies as the 15th Doctor. And also we have the surprising announcement that Disney has signed Doctor Who to a distribution deal, so beginning next year, new episodes will be streaming in the US on the Disney Plus platform, which I have heard a lot of mixed debate about this and what it means, and confusion from fans who don't know the difference between a distribution deal and a production deal. But the good news is you will now hopefully be able to get your Doctor Who episodes at the exact same time that they are aired in the UK, and you will not have to worry about commercial interference or tape delay, as we've been doing here in the States for many, many, many years. Another bit of exciting news is that the old diamond logo, including the logo that was used in the opening credits to Image of the Fendahl and every other Doctor Who story between 1974 and the beginning of 1980, will have its return to the Doctor Who world. Very excited to see that. Also very excited for the very first interview that was put up on the Doctor Who YouTube channel with Ncuti Gatwa. So let's give that a listen right now.
Hello, I'm Ncuti Gatwa, and I am the next Doctor in the next season of Doctor Who. And to celebrate the news that will be landing on the BBC and Disney Plus, I'm here to answer some questions. Let's go. Doctor Who is a show about an alien Time Lord with 2 hearts, who travels through time and space with a human companion by their side in the TARDIS. Now, the TARDIS is a spaceship that looks like an old British police box that you used to see on street corners, but it is so much bigger on the inside. Each episode, the Doctor can travel in time and space to the furthest reaches of the universe in the deepest times in history. The Doctor is full of optimism and hope, with a fierce sense of right and wrong. They are clever and courageous. The Doctor doesn't carry any weapons, just a sonic screwdriver for fixing things and getting out of tricky situations. They're full of adventure, running towards danger, but when fatally injured, they can regenerate. So a new body, new face, but with a soul and a memory that carries generations of knowledge and experience. What more do you want? I am so excited. Obviously, it's daunting. It's an iconic role and show, and I'm following in some very big footsteps. But I cannot wait to put my stamp on the character. With every new Doctor comes a new beginning for the show, and there are some extraordinary storylines for the season. So I'm going to be very, very busy. I would take my TARDIS to Africa. I would take my TARDIS to Nigeria. And I would love for the Doctor to meet the Orisha, which were a set of gods in Nigerian mythology. And I think that he'd have a lovely old time there. What villain would I choose? The Weeping Angels is always a classic, and they are just genuinely terrifying. I would love to battle the Beast, because what an ultimate villain. That is the devil, and I don't think you get much more evil than that. There is so much to come in the next season. The TARDIS can go anywhere and will go anywhere, and nothing is too big nor small. Right, that's it for the moment. I've got to get back to the TARDIS, but don't forget, the new season of Doctor Who will be exclusively on the BBC in the UK and Disney Plus in the rest of the world in 2023. See you then.
That is very exciting news. It seems like the future of the show is in very, very good hands as we head into the 60th anniversary season, the Diamond anniversary season, with the return of the Diamond logo. You can hear me over on Trap 1, along with Conrad and Pete and Mark, all of whom have been on the show several times before and will doubtless be on it several times again in the future. We got together on Tuesday and we recorded an episode breaking down the power of the Doctor. You can hear some of my very long hot takes on the episode. Now, I was out of town for the week and I couldn't take part in the second part of that recording, which is a 20-minute flashcast about the Disney Plus news. But Conrad, along with Pete and Mark, broke that down. Please give a listen, and I will put links in the show notes so that you can hear both Trap 1 episodes about the Power of the Doctor special and the forthcoming news about what's going to happen next year. Over on Twitter, with the Power of the Doctor airing on October 23rd, 2022. That was the end of my Doctor Who pilgrimage. Remember that I had started watching the series back from the very first 1963 episode on October 26th, 2020, during the pandemic. And I watched the entirety of the series from November 23rd, 1963 through October 23rd, 2022, along with several spin-offs, both authorized and unauthorized. All my thoughts for all the episodes that I watched are up on Twitter under the hashtag Doctor Who Pilgrimage, DRWho Pilgrimage. I will be starting a new pilgrimage for a different TV series next week, and you'll find out more about that at the very end of this show. I will also have to change my outro so that I will no longer be mentioning the Doctor Who Pilgrimage hashtag in each episode, but that stuff will stay up for as long as Twitter exists. And of course, with Elon Musk in charge, who knows how much longer that will be. In the meantime, next week is episode 50, a landmark episode in the life of any podcast. I encourage you to get in your submissions. I would love audio clips, between 3 and 5 minutes, or if you prefer me to read it out, you can certainly send me your text. Any thoughts or memories that you have of the War Games, either the book or the TV episode. The War Games was a landmark Doctor Who serial. It was the last story of the Second Doctor. It introduced so much of the series mythology that is still with us today, even up through the Power of the Doctor itself, the most recent episode. So you have 6 more days to get that in, and I will include as many of those contributions as I get for next week's episode. However, now, after a couple of trailers for other episodes in the Direction Point Podcast Network, we will have back on my very good friend, David Barsky, talking about his new TV series and our favorite TV series, Doctor Who. And then after that, my review of Doctor Who and the Image of the Fendahl. Let's get to it.
Are you ready to travel through time with us? Then check out Traveling the Vortex, a Doctor Who podcast. For nearly 7 years and more than 500 episodes, we've traveled from one end of the vortex to the other, making different stops with different doctors, reviewing everything from TV stories to audio plays, from books to comics, and more. Sean, Keith, and Glenn take you on a journey through 50-plus years of Doctor Who episodes and spin-off materials. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, so be sure to check us out. And now, we're a proud member of Direction Point, a Doctor Who podcast network. You're listening to the Doctor Who Literature Podcast.
So, David Barsky, my sometimes co-producer, how are you, man? Good to see you again.
Great to see you, Jason. I don't know about that title. I appreciate the nod. As I said to you before, too bad this wasn't a video podcast. I could put it on my IMDb, but for anybody who knows what that is. But anyway, but I feel like we have to reevaluate our relationship here now. I mean, producer credit notwithstanding, it seems like all we ever talk about now is dicks. So,
well, in 3 weeks, you're going to have a martyr complex because I have you on back in a few weeks to discuss an Ian Martyr novelization, and I won't say which one.
I won't either, but I'm really looking forward to that for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, you are booked. I'll just spoiler. I have you booked for each of these 7 classic series Doctors. So you're going to be a mainstay on this show until the bitter end, which is probably about 2.5 years from now.
Hey, it's by choice, of course. I wanted to get at least one in for each Doctor,
Well, you are one of my favorite people, and you're one of my honored guests, so you get whatever you want. So you are booked all the way through to a Sylvester McCoy book, and I will not say which one, but you are good to go.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, man. I feel like I've stuff to live up to now.
So speaking of producer credits, you've been out of town for a series. Can you tell us what you've been working on?
Yeah, I guess I can. I just got back from, living in Virginia and the DC area for a new Tubi series. Tubi, if you don't know, is a digital platform that's owned by Fox, and I did a show that is in conjunction with Studio Ramsey, with Gordon Ramsay's production company. He's that celebrity chef.
Yes.
And I did another sort of restaurant renovation show with another sort of celebrity chef. His name is by the way, Andre Rush. He gained some notability, I guess, on social media. He served some tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was the presidential chef at the White House for President Obama.
Oh, wow.
And he actually he gained some notoriety on Instagram, I guess it was, for doing 2,222 push-ups a day. And he's got biceps that are thicker than my head. Yeah, and he's despite what his stereotypical look might be, man, the guy can cook the hell out of a dinner. Let me tell you that. I gained a few pounds, to say the least.
So he's a celebrity chef, former military, and he has biceps the size of Terrance Dicks' bookshelf.
Yeah, pretty much. There you go. Should have kept it on brand for you. I'm sorry about that. My analogies are sometimes off.
So how many episodes did you run?
We did 10 episodes in all, and they're all going to drop. I believe the plan now is Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, wow. So that's going to be on Tubi, or is that going to be on Fox after the game?
It's going to be on Tubi. They may there's talk about promoting it on Fox. I think just because the Super Bowl, I believe, is on Fox this year, so that could be very good. Ramsey obviously has got some big time clout over there at Fox, so. It's all good. It was honestly one of the best experiences I've had in a long time. I love the show. It was a lot of fun. Chef Rush was amazing. He was such a great guy, great to work with, willing to learn, because he's never really done television like this before. He's done a lot of stuff on YouTube and things like that. Different format. And he was awesome to work with, and I already miss it. After that, after the show wrapped, I went up to spend some time with my mom up in Boston. Then I drove home.
Cross country.
Yeah, I tend to do that. I've done that, I think 3 times in the last 2 years, if not 4. When I get a gig, I tell them I want to drive just because I like to see things. I like to, when I can, work in a short hike, in random places like, I don't know, Tennessee or Alabama, where I'm going.
And to work off all the extra meals from Andre Rush.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, I'm still doing that.
I put on some weight with the COVID, and at the urging of my GP, I've gotten back into my old cardio fitness routine. So 3 45-minute classes a week. Now there's a push-up regimen to that. I'm trying to calculate. I don't know if I've done 2,200 push-ups in my life.
Yeah.
It's probable that I have, but 2,200 in a day is well beyond my engineering tolerances.
Yeah, no, he gets up at 3:00 in the morning, and it takes him an hour and a half to finish.
If I were to wake up at 4 in the morning and spend 90 minutes in an activity, I'd be watching Logopolis, which is about 90 minutes. And you fast forward to the credits.
I've actually done that. But I think the last time I woke up at 4:00 in the morning and watched something, it was, I believe, the commentary on what is it, Tomb of the Cybermen.
The original commentary with Fraser and Debbie Watling, or the more recent commentaries for the later releases?
The original. I haven't. I have some of those, I believe, but I haven't really delved into them.
That was the one, I think, every third sentence out of Debbie Watling, bless Debbie Watling, wonderful person, but I think everything she says on the commentary is, "My goodness, Fraser, isn't he tall? My goodness, Fraser, look how tall he is." That was before they had Toby Haydock and others moderating the commentary, so some of the early ones are full of interesting actor observations.
Yeah, Toby has his work cut out for him. He's a great guy, and he does needless to say, does a great job on those commentaries. I mean, he's very valued in the community, and he's a great historian for the show.
And a great cheerleader for the show. And just, there have been some really good moderators, and there have been some really good commentary tracks with just the performers. But when he is in there, it is a special brand of magic.
Yeah, no, he's great on every level. I like his podcast as well as one of the other few Doctor Who's I currently listen to. And I had the pleasure of meeting him, and I believe I gave him some scotch that I had in my pants. I tend to do that at conventions.
I'm still recovering from the scotch that you gave me at Galley a few years ago.
Dude, just say no. I'm telling you all the time. I'm no pressure here, man.
When David Barsky gives you a request, you don't say no. That's my rule of thumb.
Oh boy! All right. Well, I'm here.
So, when you drive cross country, which route do you take? We lived in LA for 2 years. When we moved back to Brooklyn in 2008, we did the cross country drive on 66, but we didn't do straight up 66. We did about half local roads, half interstate each day to get home in 9 days. How do you do it?
It really varies. Let me see. In March of 21, I went out to visit my mom. I took a very, very southern route. I cut down on Highway 10, Interstate 10, and then went down to the very southern area of Texas to Galveston. I've never been to Galveston, and then I went through Louisiana, and then cut up on. Eventually, I guess I hit 81. That goes all the way up to Pennsylvania, through Virginia and all that, and then over through New York and Boston. But on the way home, I took 80 and 90. So I went through Montana. I just like varying up so I can see as much as possible in this country. I have this insane dream to set foot in every country in the United States. Every county in the United States.
Every county, wow.
Yeah, and I do keep count. And it's not just drive through. I gotta step out, and I gotta experience something about it.
Now, Maine has that big unincorporated area in the northern part of the state. I forget the designation.
It's actually it is still part of a county. There's not quite. Actually, New Hampshire has some of that as well. They are unincorporated areas that are part of counties, but they're not townships per se. But Maine has, I believe, 16 counties or 23. I can't remember the exact. I think it might be 16. I completed Virginia while I was out there on my weekends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The weird thing about Virginia, it's a big pain in the butt. because it's got this weird elongated shape. I don't know if you know. I've been fascinated with geography and the shapes of the states. I had a puzzle when I was a little kid. My mom bought me, and fun fact: in the fourth grade, for some random reason, every child in the fourth grade when I was there was handed out a silhouetted map of the United States with nothing on it, no names, nothing, and they told us to fill in the names of every state. I was the only person in the whole class able to do that.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, two other people came, they were like missed one. But I mean, we're talking 100 something kids, and I'm looking at my smart best friends, and they're literally we're in Massachusetts, and he had Connecticut for New York. And I'm like, oh God, man, this is weird. I lost a lot of respect for a lot of people that day. But Virginia is really bizarre because, as far as visiting the counties, because they have actually, I believe, 40 cities that are not part of counties. So they're kind of like city counties, but they're not. But if you want to include them in a county count, there are 133 counties, and sometimes these cities exist in the middle of another county, so you got to find your way to them. Plus, the mountains are, the highways going through the mountains of Virginia. Sometimes it's a little easier access. It's not something you can do in a weekend, that's for sure. And they got these two weird little, I call it the Dingleberry counties. They hang off the butt of Maryland. So, and they're across the Chesapeake Bay. So you have to take, if you want to access them through Virginia, from the county / city of Virginia Beach, you got to take the several mile bridge that costs $18 to go across. And I did that in 2021.
Well, Maryland has the Eastern Shore. Louisiana has parishes instead of counties. Baltimore is a city and a county at the same time, so you got to do both.
Yep.
So that requires some pretty serious algorithms, I would think.
Yeah, I finished off Maryland as well this trip, as well as New Mexico. I went to the final 6 counties I haven't been to in New Mexico, along the top, and including visiting Four Corners, which is an area I've never been to before. A small little monument they have in the Navajo country, and you can, it's a fun, stupid thing. You can take a picture yourself, in 4 states at once.
Yeah, we drove through New Mexico on 66. We did Continental Divide, which I knew was the title of a John Belushi movie. We did not get a chance to go to the Four Corners.
Oh, yeah. It's a little out of the way. I mean, you got to go up by Shiprock, and that's, in very, obviously it's in the northwestern corner of the state of New Mexico. That's the easiest way to access it, unless you want to come up through Flagstaff for a couple of hours. And I actually obviously I was coming from the east, so I went through Shiprock. I made the detour. It's about 45 minutes or so to Four Corners, and then I went down to Flagstaff, and actually decided to get some sleep. My final night on the road was in Flagstaff.
So speaking of sleep, let's talk about a television story that it's decent. It's got its high points for me. Is not one of my favorites. Image of the Fendahl. And in terms of books, it would take about, I think, 100 copies of Image of the Fendahl, which is only 103 pages, to match Andre Rush's biceps.
Yeah, you're probably right. I actually counted 102 in my volume. I have actually a British volume. It's not. It was one before. Starts on page 7, ends in 109.
Yeah, it's 103.
Oh, it's 103. Oh, I guess you're counting. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess that's right.
We take our calculations very seriously here on Doctor Who literature. We have the slide rule, we have the compass, we have the pocket calculator.
But if you go to page 60, that's like a fifth of the page. So you got to include how much blank space there are at the end of chapters as well.
That is true. And of course, this is a book with lots of scenes and lots of blank spaces between scenes. So there are some pages that are more blank space than text.
I remember when I had the entire collection, this thing was sitting on my desk at home when I was growing up, and I kept on looking at it, and I knew it's the skinniest volume it's got to be. I mean, A Robots of Death is also, pretty damn close, but this is pretty anemic as far as, how thick it is, of course. But it's kind of one of the reasons why I chose it, why I wanted to do it, because as far as the story goes, I've had sort of a weird history with it. Like I've told you, I had many people, they had that first initial, package of the first 4 seasons of Tom Baker. And I was in Doctor Who for the Monsters, and I was about 10 years old when I first saw this story. And I watched it as a strip. They aired it as a strip. It was Monday through Friday. So I may have seen this over a weekend. I don't know how it was divided up, but I had a lot of trouble following it. I mean, and it's so dense with ideas and um, amazingly dense with ideas, and perhaps too many. And but that's okay. I always gleaned something more every time I saw it. In fact, there's little bits and pieces. I mean, I last saw it maybe 3 years ago. I think I watched it, and I got more out of it. But and I always knew. Well, I mean, probably when I got older, probably my late teens, early 20s. It is lifted in a great part of what I've always called my favorite movie of all time, Quatermass in the Pit. Anytime anyone asks me that question, what's your favorite movie? I always say Quatermass in the Pit. I have for at least 30 years.
Now, being in the States where that is not as well known a movie, what are the reactions that you get when you say your favorite movie is Quatermass in the Pit?
Totally blank. Unless, I mean, most quote unquote normies have no freaking idea what that is. Then I kind of jokingly say, well, in the States, it was known as 5 million years to Earth. That's how I first saw it. And then they even go blanker. They just want to leave the conversation, really.
I will tell you this about Quatermass. It's 1990, I think, so I'm still in high school. And a bunch of us go to the local triplex. That was back when you could still have a 3-screen theater be economically viable.
Mm-hmm.
We went to see Gremlins 2, The New Batch.
Oh, boy.
It is an underrated movie. It is better than the first one, I think, even though it's not as serious. And it is full of references to every obscure sci-fi movie / franchise, with the exception of Doctor Who. But it takes place in a Donald Trump-esque skyscraper. And the bad guy in the movie is a cross between Trump, this is pre-politics Trump, and Ted Turner.
Mm-hmm.
So it talks about a colorized version of Casablanca with a happier ending, for example. So Christopher Lee plays the mad scientist in the first half of the movie, and he's one of the vehicles through which the gremlins not only escape, but get transformed into a variety of genetically mutated crazy gremlins, one of whom talks like the actor Tony Randall.
Yeah, I remember that.
And as you're walking through the corridors by Christopher Lee's office, there's a sign pointing to Professor Quatermass's office space.
Oh.
And I was probably the only teenager in the theater who goes, I know Professor Quatermass! Because I hadn't seen it at that point, but I read about it in, I think, Doctor Who, The Early Years, or Doctor Who, A Celebration, one of those hardcover Peter Haining volumes.
Yeah, it's probably Celebration for sure.
Yeah. So that's how I recognize the name Quatermass.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I'm going to have to watch that movie again because I think I've only seen it once. And, I had a bad attitude about sequels that generally kind of, sort of patted themselves off to the original, especially in sci-fi fantasy realm. Like Ghostbusters 2 was completely, that was awful. But whatever the case, yeah, I mean, I love that movie because I guess it's got a lot of things that appeal to me in the genre, the alien invasion in the form of ancient aliens, if you will. Archaeology is a big thing of mine. I'm not an amateur archaeologist, but I love reading about it. Every time there's an article, I subscribe to certain newsletters about archaeology and stuff like that. So, it's got a lot of things, and the funny thing though, about Images of Fendahl though, it obviously we know the Third Doctor story, The Demons, also takes a lot from, Quatermass in the Pit.
Right.
But, between the Demons and Fendahl, they pick and choose different things to rip off. But interestingly enough, Fendahl rips off the Demons far more than it does the Quatermass story, mainly because the whole POV of the Wiccan doesn't exist at all in the Quatermass story. At all, it
right.
is.
That is a much more Doctor Who obsession.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the Demons introduced that, and of course, I think it's done much better in Fendahl, quite frankly. I think Miss Hawthorne is probably a little bit more of a caricature than Gran is, for instance. But More subtle of a character as well, Mrs. T. Definitely.
Grant has a day job as the cook at the Priory,
Yep.
and she has her clients, and she has that amazing scene. Now, just to backtrack, I think there is a great story waiting to get out of Image of the Fendahl. This was in the interregnum when Robert Holmes was out the door as script editor.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Reed was coming in. This story was made in the middle of the season. With
Yep.
some massaging and rewriting, this could have been one of my favorites. There's a lot that the script never bothers to explain.
Right.
And because it is a Graham Williams production rather than Philip Hinchcliffe, and because you've already lost the great directors, David Maloney left the series for good, Douglas Camfield left the series for good, Michael E. Bryant left the series for good, you're left with George Spenton Foster. I think this is his only Doctor Who.
Actually, no. Ironically enough, he also did my next novel.
Which is one of my favorite stories, full stop. But this one, I think he just doesn't really, nobody massages the script. So there's a lot that's left unexplained. And I think the best parts of the script are the parts that aren't told. A lot more could have been done with a time scanner. Basically, Professor Fendelman is this Elon Musk type who is basically a billionaire weapons contractor who's developed this time scanner. And the story doesn't do much with it, and it's never explained why Thea was chosen by the. Was Thea chosen by the Fendahl because she happened to be near the skull when it activated, or was she part of this generations-long curse,
Right.
going back millions of years? So I have a lot of questions like that. However, the scene where the Doctor is trying to get Granny out of her trance by reciting the recipe for a fruitcake, and she reacts to it, is just one of the great. If you do a highlight reel of all the great Tom Baker acting moments, that's got to be up there.
Yeah, no, it's really great. And the way she snaps out of it, absolutely. I mean, and again, as I said, a lot of things confused me as a kid. And even though I knew this was a rather anemic book, I chose it because I was hoping maybe Dicks explained some stuff.
All right, so that's the next question. Does he understand the story enough to provide us really good explanations?
I'm gonna say maybe. I'm kind of. Although ultimately no, because here's the thing. I started off really, really enjoying this book right from page one because instantly, there's a Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, phrase, and I was like, okay, that's new. And we all know that Dicks probably puts the most energy in his opening paragraphs in every novel. I mean, you've pointed that out in previous episodes, and I'm like, all right, this is cool. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Coleridge. I actually got I got into him in a very odd way. One of my favorite bands of all time riffed Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
Is that Black Sabbath?
No, Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden, yes.
Yes, Iron Maiden did in their 1984 album Power Slave. The final. They have a 13-minute and 3-second song called Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, and actually takes a few of the stanzas and recites them, but tells the whole story in the song. And it's one of my favorite songs to hear them live, play live. Unfortunately, they did not play it last week when I saw them in Worcester, Massachusetts. But anyway, so the funny thing about it is, I got into Coleridge because of that song, and I actually quoted it. I don't know why, I can't remember why, but in my English class sophomore year, I referenced Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner in relation to something we were talking about in the class. And unbeknownst to me, my English teacher nominated me and I won Student of the Month. And in part because I referenced something that was outside of the class. So thank you, Iron Maiden. But anyway, so yeah, I was like Student of the Month for my sophomore class. But when I saw that pop up, and I actually always love that scene with the hiker too. Another stupid offhand reference. I watch a lot of horror films. As I said, look, Quatermass in the Pit is my favorite. Another Quatermassy Hammer production, X the Unknown. Are you familiar with that?
I am not, but I will point out, this is my Halloween episode. This is going to drop on October 30th. We are recording this the Wednesday before Halloween, and you are sitting in a dark candlelit study. So this could not be a more Halloweeny episode if we tried.
Absolutely. I mean, listen. I mean, people walking through the forest, fearing the dark, and what's creeping up upon them is something you see in horror movies all the time. But
American Werewolf in London begins with the exact same scene.
exactly. However, when I was a kid and I first saw this, and memory has does not serve me now, I'm afraid, and I lost which I saw first: Image of the Fendahl or X the Unknown. This film has but it always reminded me the scene and the way it's shot, and someone standing stiff, looking at something in shock that we cannot see but only can hear, staring at this thing, approaching it from the monster's point of view, was used in X the Unknown when two kids are walking through the forest and this energy creature is approaching one of the kids because they got separated. The kid who got burned by this energy creature escaped, but his friend later caught up with him. You know who played his friend at the age of 6, I believe?
Who is that? I'm looking this up, but I'm going to have you tell us.
Fraser Hines was the child actor who played his friend in that wooded scene.
Oh, I am going to have to immediately find this. Okay, there we go. You're right. Fraser Hines, 1956. Wow.
But I've always thought of that scene when I saw this on television. I was like, oh my god! It just reminded me because I remember seeing this movie and probably not understanding Accident Unknown, but I saw it a lot of times because it was in the syndicated cycle, just like Doctor Who was on an independent station in Boston that showed all the great movies.
There are two other Doctor Who actors in the cast. I will give you the actors. Actually, sorry, three Doctor Who actors in the cast. I'll give you the actor's name. You give me the role.
Okay.
Kenneth Cope. Who is Kenneth Cope in Doctor Who?
See, I am really bad at this part, unless they're really like big ones. I know Julian Glover. You know, he was in what do you call it? He was in Quatermass in the Pit, of course, and he did a couple of Doctor Who's. I don't know who Kenneth Cope is.
I'll narrow it down. I'll give you 2 hints. First hint, season 18.
Oh my. Season 18. Wow.
Which is probably the greatest Doctor Who season of all time in the classic series, with the possible exception of 7.
No, we can debate that a lot, dude.
And I'm sure we will, because you're going to be doing 7 Doctors on this show, so we'll have plenty of time.
Yeah. Gosh. You know,
one more hint. Warrior's Gate.
Oh my God! Yeah, I don't know who he played in that though, because he looks a lot different from 1956, I believe that movie was.
That's true. He was Packard, so he was the bald executive officer to Captain Rorvik.
Yeah.
Another one is fairly obscure. John Harvey. John Harvey was in 2 black and white stories. The larger one was a Hartnell era story.
Oh, I have no idea, man.
Again, Toby Haydock would have this without even being asked.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's all about the actors, man. He knows them. You know.
So John Harvey was Professor Brett in The War Machines, which is a great mad scientist turn.
Yep.
And then the last one is Edwin Richfield.
Oh God, don't even.
Who is best? He was in 2 Doctor Who's. He's best known for wearing a hideous rubber mask in Colin Baker's first story.
Oh my God! So he was one of the one of the Birdmen.
He was inside Nestor.
Oh, he was Nestor. Oh my God!
And he also had a very large part as the Brigadier surrogate in the Sea Devils. Now, bearing in mind, I have not seen this movie. I'm just on Wikipedia, and these names jump out at me off the page because of my Doctor Who credits obsession.
I'm definitely that's great. I'm not an actor person like I probably should be on some of these people. I'm more about obviously directors and writers, but yeah, that's great. It's funny. I was thinking this morning, I was like, what other games could Jason play on his podcast? I think you might have found one.
Yeah, we will have to next time you're back. We will have to play.
No, we're not playing this game though. I just did, and I lost horribly.
I thought about giving you the limericks game for this one, but I had a really hard time finding a rhyme for Wanda Ventham, so I gave up. And we're going to play 20 questions instead in a few minutes.
Oh, Wayne, I'll take it. I'll take it any which way you can give it to me, man. I'm not worried about it.
So I was introduced to Rime of the Ancient Mariner through this book. I would have been 11 or 12 years old, and I wouldn't have heard of Coleridge.
What about Iron Maiden? Did you hear about them?
I was not given Iron Maiden record albums by my parents. That was kept from me until I was much older. Remember, this is the 80s. This is the middle of a satanic panic. So that stuff
Well,
was not allowed in
Iron
my
Maiden
house.
went through that before a lot because they had their 1982 album Number of the Beast, and there was all that kind of crap going on with them. But then, of course, they kind of try to counteract that a little bit with their next album with a song called Revelations. And but whatever the case, yeah, it's all baloney. But I could go on for days about that as well. Pardon me, I didn't mean to interrupt your story.
No worries. So my 10th grade English class in high school, Mrs. Montalbano, the entire text of Rime of the Ancient Mariner appeared in our reader. So she had the entire class read it out. Every student would get 3 or 4 stanzas going down the line. And just by coincidence, having not done my homework and having not read the poem the night before, I am just reading this on the fly. And I get assigned the stanza, like one who on a lonesome road does walk in fear and dread.
You
And
actually
having
had that
once
line.
turned round, walked on, and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend is close behind him tread. I got that I recognized from my copy of Image of the Fendahl. I'm like, I know this. This is awesome. So because of that, Rime of the Ancient Mariner became my favorite poem, and I probably have it's 7 parts. I probably have the entire first part memorized. The other parts I'm not so good at, but I could probably do the first 20 stanzas off the
Nice.
top of my head. And this is a short podcast, so I won't. But Ancient Mariner is ingrained in the old cranium up here.
Well, give the Iron Maiden tune a listen.
I will. And for copyright reasons, I'm not going to be playing it out, but I will give it a listen. And I encourage you to pause the episode, listen to all 13 minutes and 3 seconds, and then come back for the exciting conclusion of David Barsky and the Image of the Fendahl.
Oh, and there are several live versions if you want to find those on YouTube as well. But I'd recommend the original.
Do they have the Chris Boucher / Terrance Dicks stanza in the song?
They do not. They do not. They have "Water, Water Everywhere," that which they actually sing that the water, water every, excuse me, water, water everywhere, and there's a couple spoken word in the middle where they do this like awesome break in the song where it's like they're on the ocean and you hear like creaky ship sounds of a ship adrift at sea, and they talk about each the crew member falling down one by one, and he cursed me with a ghastly pang. That kind of they do that stanza, and another one in that same little bit. It's brilliant.
So this reminds me of Grand Funk Railroad's Closer to Home, which also has the aquatic sounds, but it's not quite as long as the Iron Maiden.
Yeah. I mean, the break in the middle of the song is absolutely beautiful. Of course, they do the what do you call it? The effect, the smoke effect coming like it rolls over the edge of the stage. It's freaking amazing. Dry ice.
Wow, I'm gonna have to find that. So does Terrance Dicks understand the story? I don't think he does, because he doesn't provide an explanation for a lot of the things about the story that I don't understand.
I agree. I mean, it's one of the things. Like I said, we haven't got past page 1 on your question. I'm sorry, because as I said, I was like, "Hey, I'm into this," and for the most part, I enjoyed this book, and I didn't really expect to, because it is a very thin volume. But as you go along, he does provide a little bit of backstory on the mindset of Fendelman, a little bit on style, but as far as characterization goes, we really needed something with Thea, who undergoes the biggest arc of anybody in this whole story. Even on screen, you see how she starts to understand that she is, and admits she is carrying out this plan. It's her plan. It's not Fendelman's plan. And so I'd love to know what she was thinking, how she's dealing with it. And we know she goes out to seek the doctor for help. And why doesn't Dicks provide anything on her thought process? That would have been the best thing he could have done for this book, to help us understand Thea's transformation.
He does explain a little bit about Max Stale's obsession with the occult.
Yep.
And I think he goes a smidge into Professor Fendelman's previous career as a munitions developer. But again, and this is not, there are some really good performers in this cast. Wanda Ventham, absolutely beyond reproach. the actress who plays Granny and the actor who plays Jack, who later came back 2 years later to be in Nightmare of Eden.
Right.
Those are really good actors, but Colby is a very funny character. He is the wit in the house.
Mm-hmm.
He is the Groucho Marx type. No matter what somebody says, he has to have a funny line playing off what he's just heard. But as directed on TV, most of the humor is diffused, and it doesn't really come across in the book so much either.
No, you're right about Colby, and he really plays off, Max Style, and they're like totally opposite of each other, styles. So very very serious. I think you're right. I think Tom Baker does have a lot of good stuff, and there's one great visual pun that actually plays in the story that I love. And honest to God, I didn't catch until the second to last time I watched it. Was at the end when Leela's running out of the basement, and she throws a bottle of salt over her shoulder, and they've already established that the doctor, even the many things that the race memory that might have started from the Fendahl includes the legend of throwing salt over your shoulder. And she did that, and I thought that's brilliant. Of course, Dicks. I don't know if he watched the damn thing at that point. He missed that. He did not include that, or he's includes some other stuff as well. The funny thing is, I was a little put off by, and I didn't remember this, but in viewing the story, a little put off by the doctor's temperament towards Leela at the beginning, and that too reminded me. I was like, I wonder if Boucher actually watched the demons and said, "Oh, this is the doctor. What the doctor should be like," because the doctor ain't great. The third doctor is not very nice to Joe in that story.
Not at all.
It's one of the biggest complaints I have about that story.
It may be more to do with Tom Baker really not wanting Louise Jameson on the show at that point, still missing Elizabeth Sladen, as did we all. And if you watch the studio scenes, he refuses as an actor to make eye contact with his co-star, which is not very good, not very generous acting.
No, not at all. And but it's funny because Louise has said by this point, I thought they had made up at Fang Rock.
Right.
But this is post Fang Rock, is it not? Was this? I think it was.
I think Fang Rock was made second, and this was made fourth. That's from memory. I think that's how it goes.
But there was probably some still. I mean, because there's and to be fair, Dicks does correct a little, quote unquote, correct a little bit of that nastiness when everybody's got to gather everything, and Tom Baker literally says to. Well, I don't want to confuse the actor with the role, but of course, in case of Tom Baker, the actor is the role. But he says, "Leela, go away." But Dick says, "Leela, you should probably go too." He's far kinder in the language that he uses when the doctor talks to Leela. Although he still uses the primitive thought patterns and that are in episode 1. He still mimics that. I should say mimics, but he actually writes that. So Dix doesn't correct all of it. He's sort of on the fence about the treatment of Leela because he does give her more agency. I noticed when the doctor at the resolution of the cliffhanger, when the doctor is trying to escape Eustace, and Eustace has got him under control. Eustace the Skull's got him under control. He puts out his other hand to stop Leela from touching him. In the book, that never happens, and Dick says Leela decides to, from her instincts, no, she shouldn't touch him, then kicks out the chair. So, he gives her a little bit more agency, which was nice to see, actually.
And Chris Boucher, of course, this was his final story for Doctor Who before he moves on to Blake 7, but he was, of course, the creator of Leela. You would have expected there to be more development consciously of the Doctor's relationship with Leela, and this should have been the story where they got along the most because they've been together the longest, but it just doesn't play out that way in studio.
It doesn't, that was a bit surprising, and that's what's a little conflicting, about it, and I thought that myself. But what Boucher does do, that Dix really doesn't play on, because it's, again, mostly a visual thing, is develop her in the whole, her original idea of the Pygmalion, nature of her and the Doctor. She's looking at the end, she's looking at the mirror, when she changed, looking at her hair. So, changing, quote unquote, the savage is evolving, sort of thing. I think he's really trying to, in the changing of the dress, I think that Boucher is trying to give her more character and show her literal development that way. Because it was initially, the whole Pygmalion, My Fair Lady aspect of their relationship was one of the remits of it. So,
and Terrance does, again, he doesn't put a lot of himself into this book, but he does give Leela a great line where she decides not to kill somebody in the text and compliments herself on how civilized she's becoming.
Exactly.
That is pure Terrance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I just think he's really on the fence about how to treat her. I don't know. I don't know if he's just trying to. He does try to add more urgency to things, and I think it's to his detriment actually as well. Not in the sense of Leela per se, but just like little touches he puts with the decomposition of Mitchell after the Fendahl attack Mitchell, the security guard. That's not in the story as it aired, but Dicks adds that as a little flourish, saying, okay, for some reason this is getting worse because this body's decomposing quicker than the hiker's is.
But Terrance also doesn't understand how the Fendahl operates, because on page 42, Mitchell stood up and found he couldn't move. His legs simply refused to obey. The door burst open and his face distorted in fear at the horror in front of him. That's fine. Next line. Mitchell screamed and died.
Yeah,
that
I have.
Maybe the worst line Terrance ever wrote.
I have that in my notes as well. I'm like, what? You really mailed it in, dude. I don't think I mean, and given like how he described the corpse of the hiker and how he died, and he just mails in Mitchell, I'm like, what's going on, man? I don't get it. I thought that was really dumb, and likewise, he gets kind of lazy with the descriptors of the Fendaline when they're approaching. What I got, the hiker when he approaches the hiker, it's a slurred, dragging, hissing, hungry sound, and when it hits and when it goes for the doctor, it's a slurred, dragging, hissing, gobbling, hungry sound. I don't know what that sounds like, and how do you know it's hungry? But with Mitchell, it's dragging, shuffling, hissing, sucking, and with a hungry quality. And then when it approaches the group, with Gran and everybody, it's what is it? Muffled, dragging, hungry, hissing, gobbling sound. So he throws out when it's four people about to be attacked, he throws everything out.
Well, I am on the road this week in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm going to make this interview a little bit shorter than normal, but you have hit some incredible points, and I think we've gotten to the bottom of this rather slim book.
Oh, man, I could go on forever.
I may ask you some supplemental questions in 3 weeks, but I want to do now is play 20 questions, because last time you and I played Guess That Cliffhanger, and you expressed dissatisfaction with your responses, so I want to give you a fair shot at 20 questions.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I think I was the guinea pig on that one.
You were the very first person to play Guess That Cliffhanger. 20 questions is a pretty established game. The record is 6. I have selected one Doctor Who serial at random from the randomizer.net between the very first story and Legend of the Sea Devils. I don't believe Power of the Doctor has been loaded up. You have 20 yes or no questions to guess the story. Question number 1.
All right. Is it a classic series story?
It is a classic series story. Halfway home, my friend. Question number 2.
Is it a black and white story?
It is a black and white story, and now you've cut the half in basically 1/3. Question number 3.
Is it a First Doctor story?
It is a First Doctor story. You're on fire. 3 for. I think the record is 4 for 4. Dale Smith did that. So your question number 4. You've got a chance to have the all-time record for most positive answers to start your game.
And the record is 6. I thought it was better than that. But I guess
the record for most yeses in a row is 4. The record for guessing episode entirely is 6.
Okay, got it. Yeah, all right. Is it a second season story?
Oh, it is not a second season story. So you're now at question 5.
Now I'm question 5, and I want to win, so I'm just going to go for it, man. Gosh, is it the Ark?
It is not the Ark. Question
Okay.
6.
Is it a third season story?
It is a third season story.
So it's on the right
Question
track.
You're on the. You're closer than you realize with question 7.
Oh man. Is it the Celestial Toymaker?
It is not the Celestial Toymaker.
Oh,
it is not who we believe Neil Patrick Harris is going to be next year on the Russell T Davies season. Question 8.
Gosh, probably should have narrowed it down. I guess there's not much more I could do though. Companion wise, is Dodo in the story?
Yes, Dodo is in the story.
All right. Okay.
Question 9. That really narrows it down because she had very few.
Yeah. Well, you consider I already guessed 2 of them, but the way you said it, I'm going to say, is it the Massacre?
Oh, see, what you're trying to do is you're trying to read my mind. You heard what you thought was hesitation in my voice.
No.
And you know that Dodo was only in the Massacre as an asterisk. And I guess I must have the world's worst poker face, which is surprising because I'm a pretty fair cards player, but my poker face failed me on that one, and you did read my expression correctly, and it is the Massacre, and you got it in 9. That is a very good performance.
Well, listen, Jason, you got to understand, I look at people's faces for a living on a screen for the most part as a director of television. So
I am not nearly as emotive as Stone Cold Steve Austin.
No, but I understand facial expressions very well, and I listened to people's voices, and I understand pauses in their voices as well, and that kind of gave it away as well.
Next time, I may have to do our episode wearing a mask and throwing my voice through a voice changer.
Give it a try. We'll see what happens.
All right, David, you've been a terrific guest. We're going to have you back in a few short weeks to discuss Ian Marta. We will not be discussing Dicks. We're not discussing the slender dicks or the larger dicks of the Auton invasion.
Yeah.
I apologize to my audience for those sophomoric jokes, but David brings out the best in me.
Yeah. Look, we all appreciate the girth of his books or lack thereof. I don't know.
We have a much longer, denser atmospheric book next time, so get to reading. We will be picking a recording date real soon now.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you just a little tidbit, man. The next story I picked for pretty much the opposite reason why I picked this story.
Interesting. You have left us on a cliffhanger, and we will resolve that cliffhanger in 3 weeks' time. David, have a great night.
Thanks, man.
Doctor Who and the Image of the Fendahl, written by Terrance Dicks, televised as Image of the Fendahl, teleplay by Chris Boucher, televised in October and November 1977, published in July 1979. The Fendahl is death, said the Doctor. How do you kill death itself? The ultra-modern technology of the time scanner combines with the ancient evil of fetch wood and brings to life a terror that has lain hidden for 12 million years. The Doctor and Leela fight to destroy the Fendahl, a recreated menace that threatens to devour all life in the galaxy. And there you have it. That may be to date the shortest Target book back cover blurb of all time. I guess even the editor couldn't make much sense of this story. You can usually tell when Terrance Dicks loves adapting a Doctor Who story that he did not write the teleplay for. He'll go all out on building up the story, often with prologues or epilogues, Pyramids of Mars, The Horns of Nimon, or lush prose passages and elevating the dialogue, Talons of Wang Chiang. With Image of the Fendahl, however, you can imagine that Terrance didn't have much use for its disjointed exposition-light script. His work is only 103 pages long. Chapter 1 is made of brief bursts of scenes, taken from the camera script, with no connective tissue added to help explain why any of this is happening, except of course for the quote from Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which Dave and I talked about earlier in the hour. Chapter 2 adds the important detail that Stahl, one of the Fetch Priory scientists, is a student of the occult, and tells us why the house dog is named Leaky. But otherwise, I think Terrance might have been just as bewildered by the TV story as I was. Now, a lot of this is down to the TV story, not Terrance. As Barsky and I discussed, I find Fendahl frustrating. I want to love it. I've watched it several times and given it innumerable second chances to find out what I'm missing, and I'm convinced that had there been page count enough and time, the right novelization could get me to love this story unreservedly. The backstory and image of the Fendahl is crying out for a sprawling 400-page novel. Check this. Dr. Fendelman is an electronics wizard, influential at designing missile guidance systems, which makes him one of the richest men in Europe. But while designing weapons, he discovers something else, some hitherto unknown principle. As a result, he's able to build a time scanner, a tremendously sophisticated device that enables him to actually look back in time and watch the past. Now, in Doctor Who continuity terms, he could well have been using technology provided by Professor Whittaker and or funded by Count Scarlioni, but this TV story is continuity free. In operating his time scanner, Fendelman comes to learn that life on Earth did not originate on Earth, and that man's earliest ancestor actually arrived from the stars 12 million years ago. As a result, Fendelman recruits a crack team: Colby, a passionate paleontologist; Thea Ransom, a lab technician who's better at potassium-argon dating old objects than anyone;
Are you questioning my technical competence?
Of course not. The volcanic sediment is 12 million years old. I accept without reservation the results of your excellent potassium-argon tests.
Thank you.
and Max Stahl, who, well, we never quite learn what's his skill set. Stahl is also secretly an occultist, and the time scanner operates out of a house in one of those old British villages where witchcraft and the old religion are still very much in vogue. Stahl comes to believe that when Colby digs up that 12-million-year-old skull, it will represent not just a human ancestor, but one of the old gods, and he quickly mobilizes the village coven to summon up that skull's latent power. Meanwhile, Thea, by unfortunate accident of being alone in the room with the skull when the time scanner operates, gets possessed by that skull's psychic powers. For when you x-ray the skull, you can see that the bone pattern in the crown forms the perfect pentagram, a powerful occult symbol. That is a lush, dense backstory. Unfortunately, almost none of it is revealed outright. You just have to guess at it from various hints dropped down. The TV characters remain one-dimensional, and especially in Thea's case, frustratingly out of focus. The Doctor gives several explanations in Part 4 as to what the plot could mean, before giving up and saying that it could all just be a coincidence. The TV script is made up of dozens of short scenes that often end in mid-conversation, leading you to wonder what else the characters are saying after the camera pulls away. Fendelman and Stahl are enigmas, and we never learn why the skull seizes on Thea rather than someone else. Stahl and Fendelman should be interesting characters. Both are wasted here. Good actors whose best work was done in other Who episodes, most notably Dennis Lill in 1984's The Awakening. Just as Fendelman is about to reveal, quote, the true genesis of Homo sapiens, end quote, in Part 3, Stahl interrupts him at gunpoint, and we never even see that true genesis. The script builds, and builds, and builds, and then ignores. Plus, the bit of nonsense about the time scanner blowing up the Earth, the whole Earth, after 100 hours of operation, augurs a nice scene transition, where we see the machine's been in use for 99 hours already. But that ends up being an unnecessary beat of jeopardy, as the Fendahl's planning on destroying the world anyway. Instead of following through on its hard sci-fi premise, the time scanner, image of the Fendahl as seen on TV is a random assemblage of disturbing images, without much regard for plot logic. The Doctor knows of the Fendahl through Gallifreyan mythology, so when he sees Thea's unconscious body randomly glowing, with two Fendahl shadows slavering over it, he instantly grasps the whole plot, but doesn't tell us till much later. Stahl's motives are left murky, as are Fendelman's. Ted Moss's character completely changes in between parts 1 and 2. The random cliffhanger of him firing at Leela, an image with no substance. as is director George Spenton Foster's delight in mixing shots of the Fendahl skull on Thea's face. This is a ghost story that's heavy on spooky imagery. And don't get me wrong, it's effective imagery. It's scary imagery. It's light, though, on connective tissue. Weird things happen, and we just have to accept them. Now, some of this brevity, at least in the book, may have been down to time. Terrance wrote 5 novelizations in 1979, including Fendahl, and some of these are among his shortest works. Destiny of the Daleks, and then, of course, the last 2 weeks we've been discussing The Invisible Enemy and The Robots of Death. There was a lot jockeying for attention on his plate. He could have easily added an extra 10 pages of exposition, imagined backstory, kind of like I did earlier, anything to pad out the story's thin narrative. But he didn't. There is one wicked thought, narrated from Fendelman's POV, that I do like. Quote, Fendelman sat staring into space for a moment. He was breaking the law, but that didn't matter. He was rich enough to get away with it. The work was too important to be endangered. Even the sacrifice of an innocent life was not too high a price. Satisfied he had come to the right decision, Fendelman returned to work. Funny that I'm writing and recording this just a day after Elon Musk finalized his buyout of Twitter, and the first thing that happened was the reinstatement of Kanye West's account. Now, the irony behind Fendelman's thought process, of course, is that Fendelman himself is later sacrificed by Stahl during the ritual meant to summon up the Fendahl late in Part 3 and turn Stahl into a god. Spoiler alert, Stahl doesn't turn into a god. Page 42 contains possibly the worst line Terrance ever wrote. Mitchell screamed and died. Now, I mentioned that line to Barsky earlier, and I certainly hold to that belief. Can't blame Terrance, though. The script wouldn't have given him much of a way to explain why or how Mitchell died now, does it? Terrance adds no explanatory text at all to Thea's confession at the end of Chapter 5 that she's responsible for all the deaths, since the script never quite makes clear for us why the Fendahl chose Thea, or how aware she is of what's going on. Better is the Doctor's observation on page 45 that getting locked up, as he is on that page, is the, quote, inevitable first step. Whenever he appears anywhere, that seems to be Terrance in 1979, basically begging for Russell T Davies to invent the psychic paper, which eventually puts an end to all that lockup business in the 2005 series, and which Terrance himself later retconned into a second Doctor past Doctor adventure, I think a World Game, which would have come out in 2005 after the new series dropped. Terrance does comment on the incongruity of the story's purported big revelations about the origin of mankind. Quote, the old-fashioned, stone-flagged kitchen seemed a strange setting for a discussion of the origins of man. And he has fun with Leela, who's proud of herself for knocking out, rather than killing, a security guard. She was really getting quite civilized, Terrance has her think. Even in the middle of a weak story, or weaker, relatively, you can find something enjoyable to take out of any Terrance novelization. For the most part, though, Terrance merely describes the action, in ways that translate what the script says, but without making larger sense, like Thea's transformation in Chapter 10. Quote, Thea Ransom was no longer a human being, but a high priestess of the Fendaline. Soon, she would be the Fendahl itself. That's it. That's the only explanation. There's really only one place in the text where Terrance tries to make sense of everything, and that's in Chapter 7 when explaining why Stahl turns evil. Over a full page of text, and none of it based on spoken lines of dialogue on TV. It's probably the best passage in the book, and here are the first and last paragraphs of that, bottom of page 64. Stahl was a man with a single obsession, power. The only child of a distinguished Austrian scientist, he had been brought up by his scientist father. His mother had died when he was born. There was little love between father and son. Stahl grew up lonely and aloof, unable to feel part of the rest of humanity. And this takes up the rest of the page. We'll jump down to the bottom of page 65, top of page 66. Quote, soon after he had begun work on the skull with Fendelman, Stahl had worked out a weird religion of his own. It involved the skull, the time scanner, the psychic energy generated by the coven, and Thea Ransom. The Part 4 material takes up 24 pages, or a little less than a quarter of the text. Part 4 is where we get most of our explanations and action sequences on TV. so the material on the printed page comes across a little rushed and cursory. Terrance, as he likes to do, uses the words weird and strange to cover for improbable events that happen on TV, though not as infamously as he'd later use them in The Eight Doctors in 1997. There is an explanation, though, on pages 95 and 96 as to why the Fendahl Core, or the High Priestess as she's called in the book, needs 12 Fendaline. It's so they can merge with her and form the Fendahl itself. I don't believe that was ever made clear on TV. Now, the Doctor on TV gave an explanation about having shot one of the Fendaline and Stahl another, i.e. Stahl himself, but the book extends that brief explanation a sentence or two further. I almost grasp it.
What is it? Have you hurt yourself?
I've got it. It is available in the Priory. The skull's absorbing the energy released when the scanner beam damages the time fissure. Why didn't I think of that before?
You can't think of everything.
I can't?
No.
No. Well, I should have thought it. I was frightened in childhood by mythological horror. Too frightened to think clearly.
The waiting is over. Prepare yourselves.
Don't do it, Stein!
Oh, shut up, you fool. Let him electrocute himself.
He will kill us all! Listen to me! All of you! He is a madman! You must stop him! Stop him now before he plunges everything into chaos and death!
I'll plunge you into chaos and death if you don't shut up.
You don't understand. I see now what will happen. Max, listen. The doctor asked if my name was real. Fendahl man of the Fendahl. But don't you see? Only for this have the generations of my fathers lived. I have been used. You are being used. Mankind has been used!
And that clip from late in part 3 is a really good example of why I find this story frustrating. The acting is good, well apart from Dennis Little's over-the-top accent, which he did not have in The Awakening years later. The scenery is good, the direction is good, Tom Baker is unusually subdued, and bearing in mind this episode falls in between The Invisible Enemy and then a few weeks later Underworld, which are not the most credible looking bits of season 15. It's just that even after watching it over and over again, the story itself is still a little opaque and, if you will, timey-wimey for me, and I wish it was a little more clear-cut and spelled out. The book wraps up with lightning speed on page 109, and since the book starts on page 7, that leaves just 103 pages of text. As Terrance concludes the book with the sentence, "The TARDIS sped on its way to new adventures," one can almost imagine that Terrance himself was glad to be speeding along to new adventures, non-Fendahl adventures himself. His next book didn't come out for another 4 full months later, Doctor Who and the Destiny of the Daleks, November 1979, which is a couple of weeks away for us, one of the longest gaps in Terrance's writing schedule for a good half-decade, and fortunately for us, he'll enjoy the next story, and more importantly, understand the next story quite a bit more than this one. Next time on Doctor Who Literature, as we wait through 4 months of 1979 for Terrance's next book, you and I will travel 2 months ahead to September 1979. It's Malcolm Hulke's first novelization in 3 years, and sadly his last, as the author had died 2 months previously, a mere 54 years old. It's the longest TV serial adapted for the target range so far, a stunningly long 10-episode classic, and the novelization, which runs just 11 chapters and 137 pages of text, is often criticized for being too short or for cutting out too much of the TV scripts. I couldn't agree less. Join me and one of my more prolific returning guests as we jump into our stolen time machines, cross multiple time zones, and say to each other several times, "No, what a stupid fool you are." Next week, Doctor Who and the War Games. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Doctor Who Literature Podcast. I'm Jason, your host and editor and producer. Special thanks to my special guest, David Barsky. This podcast can be found on most of your podcast apps of choice. You can find all past episodes at anchor.fm/DoctorWhoLit. It really helps if you rate 5 stars and subscribe. You can find me on Twitter at Doctor Who Novels, that's Dr. Who Novels. I have just wrapped up the hashtag Doctor Who Pilgrimage, that's Dr. Who Pilgrimage, and I will be starting TZ Pilgrimage, or Twilight Zone Pilgrimage. That'll be hashtag TZ Pilgrimage, hopefully within a couple of days after this episode drops. You can also contact me on email at Doctor Who Literature, that's drwholiterature@gmail.com. Please drop me a line with your comments, questions, and suggestions. Thank you for listening, and whatever you do, keep turning the pages.
A Doctor Who Podcast Network.